In my line of work, presenting the highest quality image is key. Start building your website today at squarespace.com. Use the offer code CARL to get a 10% discount. I'm Carl Taylor, and this is my Squarespace. So in our introduction to photography program, we showed you a lot about lenses and about focal length so that you could understand about different lenses. But we've had a lot of people emailing in. They've now learned about apertures and shutter speeds and things like that from us, but they wanted to know a little bit more about what the numbers written on the lenses mean. Now, as I say, we've already looked at the focal length numbers. The lower the focal length number, then the wider angle the view. But there's also another set of numbers on these lenses which define the maximum aperture value of that lens. That means its maximum light gathering ability. So if we have a look at this lens, we can see it's a 16 to 35 millimeter lens, so it's telling us that it's a wide angle zoom lens, but we can also see 1 to the ratio of 2.8. Now you can imagine that 1 to the ratio 2.8 as just being an F number, because that's f2.8. So that tells me that lens's maximum aperture is 2.8. If I pick up this other wide angle lens, I can see here that it's 1 to the ratio of 3.5. So this lens cannot gather as much light as this lens, and that also shows in the price. This lens is a lot more expensive than this one for that extra light gathering ability. This is also a Pro Series lens. It's one of the Canon L Series ones, which means the glass is made to a higher specification, a higher quality. Now, one of the other things you might have noticed here is that this says 1 to the ratio of 3.5, and then it changes to 5.6. And the reason for that is because this zoom lens, as you zoom the lens, the actual maximum aperture changes. So at its widest angle setting, it can gather more light, and it's an f3.5, but as you zoom the lens in, it loses a bit of light and it becomes a 5.6. Whereas on this Pro Series lens, that doesn't happen. As I zoom the lens from 16 to 35, the aperture will not change. You can see it's written on the side. It stays as a 2.8. So that's the sort of thing you're paying for. Let's have a look over at a couple of standard lenses here. This is a 50mm lens. This is one of my favorite lenses. This is a 50mm 1.2 lens. So we can see here 1 to the ratio of 1.2. So the maximum aperture value is 1.2. Here is also a 50mm lens, but this one is 1 to the ratio of 1.8. And you can see the difference in the maximum aperture just by looking at the lenses and the size of the front element there. And you can kind of determine that this one's going to gather more light. Look at the size difference. There's also going to be a big price difference. It's even more noticeable when we move up to the telephotos and super telephotos. Here's one of my favorite lenses. This is the 70 to 200 zoom lens. And this is a 1 to the ratio of 2.8, okay? And it remains at 2.8 whether I'm at 70 or all the way through to 200. Whereas if we look at this lens, which is a 100 to 300, as I zoom this lens, the maximum aperture is 4.5 compared to 2.8. And this one, as I zoom in, changes to a 6.7. So by zooming to its full telephoto length, I lose a lot of light and it drops to a 6.7. So not as good as this lens. What about this big monster here? Well, this is a 400mm lens. Now to get 400mm on this one, what I need to do, because this is a 200mm focal length, if I put my 2x converter on, I can convert this lens into a 140 to 400mm zoom lens. But by putting the 2x converter on, I lose 2 stops of light, and this has now become a 5.6 lens, whereas this 400mm lens is a 2.8 lens as standard, okay? You can see 1 to the ratio of 2.8. But this weighs an absolute ton compared to this, and also look at the size of the maximum aperture of that front element. Another big thing to point out is that this lens will cost you in the region of about $500 or £6,000. That's about $7,000 or $8,000. So you've got to be pretty serious about your photography to be using one of those. So that gives you a little bit of an overview of what those numbers mean on the lens. To find out which is the best quality lens, you need to do a little bit of research, read on the internet, read reviews on lenses, because there are different things about the quality of the glass and the construction of the lens that will also affect the quality. But I hope that little overview gives you something to start thinking about and understanding those aperture values on your lenses. My passion is photography. Whether shooting for clients or teaching students, the excitement of great photography never gets old. Check out my website for free training, a complete range of courses, and even photography workshops. Thank you for watching.